Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So welcome to the first BCC live event, our first webinar in a series of events we're planning for the weeks ahead of us. So it's a premiere, we call it like that. We're discovering the software solution, and but I think we already have a very interesting speech that we have planned for today. So welcome everybody to this first digital event. First of all, of course, I hope all of you are doing well. Hope you, your families, your people, at your company, etc., everybody is safe, that you're getting along with this state of confinement, maybe social distancing, it might be physical distancing, as some people say, but socially we're still able to connect and talk to each other. So this is one of these events as well that we try is important for all of us to remain connected and working all of us together. So challenging times for all of us, challenging times for companies, challenging times for the British Chamber as well. Unfortunately, we don't have all those opportunities we normally have to meet all of you, to get together with you and discuss topics, share information, etc. So it's been a long time. It took us to adapt to this somehow this situation. We realize now that it's going to continue. Luxembourg has announced yesterday that they will continue their planes being grounded until end of May. So it's probably another 5 weeks that we have to wait until transport is going to be open. There's other measures probably it's going to also somehow take longer, but all of us hope, of course, that our business will open sooner, or that somehow we will get back to a more normal state of working. For us at the British Chamber, we thought organizing this kind of conferences allows us to have a different way of talking to each other, not a different way of exchanging, because it should be even easier for everybody to connect with us or to connect between each other on specific topics. So we asked all our groups within the Chamber to prepare meetings and conferences. We have a very interesting conference coming up next week. I'll talk about that a little bit later. You will be able to ask questions. So you have a Q&A button normally at your screen. So please don't hesitate to send over questions during the speech or after the speech. And at this point of time, I would also like to thank Rebecca and Jill, who are assisting me. So actually you can see them on the screen, but they're together with me hosting this event and organizing the whole technical side. And Jill will tell us more about the questions at the end of the speech. But immediately let's welcome Ambassador, British Ambassador John Marshall. Good morning, John.
Thank you very much. Morning, Dan.
Here you are. Good to have you. Good to have you for this premiere. Good to have you for this kickoff. So thanks a lot for you to be available. I imagine that you also have home office. You're working from home, I suppose?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, doing fine? All family is okay?
Adapting, everyone's well, thank you.
And people at the embassy also, I hope everybody is doing fine. It's not too much disruption.
So they're all fine and their families are fine. I'm entering 6th week today of working from home. There were some members of the embassy who started working from home on, I think it was Monday the 16th of March, but everyone has been working from home from Tuesday the 17th. So I think we're in our stride now. We're getting used to it. We have daily meetings in the morning where we check in on everyone's health and check they're fine, the family's fine, and discuss the sort of priorities for the day. So yeah, we're all kind of learning new skills, and this is also my so used to team meetings, used to a bit of Zoom, but it's the first time I've done a webinar. So apologies in advance if I kind of do things which are ill-advised from a purist webinar point of view. We
are a network. I think basically being if you take the British Chamber of Commerce, we're a network, a business network, and I think in these times it's even more important to be member of a network, of a strong network than in other times. It's really these moments where we're there to support each other in our business and whatever questions we have, and in using Zoom, so we can discover things together. Good. I think it's also a very important week. If I read the news correctly, Brexit talks started again yesterday. Yep. Correct. Yeah. Voila. So
I thought you were going to say it's an important day because it's the Queen's birthday, the Queen's real birthday today, 94 years old. So
I'll have a drink on
Happy
her
birthday
health
to her.
tonight. Happy birthday, Mrs. Screen. Well, very well. We discussed a topic today. We said, let's talk about the impact of the virus. I think we all see the impact on our businesses. We see the impact on our families. Of course, it's interesting. We had these regular talks about Brexit, but also the relationships between the UK and Luxembourg. So we would be very happy to have your view on the influence of the virus on all those elements that are important to our lives right now. Of course, Brexit, where are we? Where are we going? How do you see the influence on business and then on the British communities also here in Luxembourg? And I would like to give the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Dan, and thanks for the invitation to participate in this premier British Chamber of Commerce webinar. And thanks to all those who have dialed in for participating. I wish I could see you all, but I can't, but I know you're out there. And I hope that you are all well, keeping well, your families too, and your work colleagues, and that you are getting through this unusual situation which faces us all. So I don't see this as a speech as such. I am just going to make a few remarks on how I see the impact of COVID-19 on Brexit business and communities, and I'm very happy at the end to take questions and to involve Dan too. So let's begin with Brexit. So the process is moving forward, despite the obvious complications that COVID-19 has imposed. You'll remember that a first round of negotiations took place back in March, with the two sides meeting physically in Brussels. And then the second round that was supposed to have taken place did not take place in the form it was supposed to, in terms of a physical meeting. But for the last few weeks, there has been progress in the sense that both sides have shared legal texts for free trade agreement and other agreements that we want to negotiate. So we, for example, have shared legal text on, as I say, the free trade agreement, an agreement on energy policy, on criminal justice, on air transport, on air safety, and on civil nuclear cooperation. And there have been technical discussions on these texts, clarifications, one side asking the other questions about the text that they have shared. And then talks have resumed this week. Last week, Michel Barnier and David Frost, our chief negotiator, met over video conference. I think it was on Wednesday last week, Wednesday the 15th. And they agreed that we should move forward with the formal negotiations, and 3 dates were basically set for the next 3 rounds. So this week, and then a further round of negotiations will take place in the week beginning the 11th of May, and then another round in the week beginning the 1st of June. And these will all take place by video conference. And the aim which was agreed again by Michel Barnier and David Frost last week, is to make good progress by June. June has always been a key date in the process, and there will be a high-level meeting in June to take stock, essentially, of where we are. First thing I should say, or the next thing I should say, very clearly, is that we will not be seeking an extension to the transition, which, as you all know, will expire on the 31st of December. Our approach to negotiations has not changed. because of COVID-19. Our vision remains of a relationship between the UK and the EU, which is a relationship of sovereign equals, based on free trade and friendly cooperation. And we will be seeking an agreement, a free trade agreement, which is based on precedents, whether it's the free trade agreements that have been agreed, which have been agreed between the EU and China, or the one agreed with Japan or Korea. So an agreement between the UK and the EU, which is based on precedent, but which preserves our right to regulate, ensures that we're not constrained by the European Court of Justice in any way, and which enables us to recover our economic and political independence, a phrase you will probably have heard UK politicians, members of the government, say on many occasions. So we are confident that despite the challenges of COVID-19, sufficient time is there for us to reach such an agreement, and for the transition period to end as planned at the end of this year. There's a lot of work to be done, but both sides, I am sure, will be focused on what needs to be done in a tight timetable, and I look forward to hearing how much progress is made in the talks this week. So I think I'll leave it there on Brexit, and move on to say just a little bit about the impact on business. But actually, I'm far more interested, I think, really in hearing from you, Dan, and others about your perspective and your views. Clearly, the situation we're in at the moment, globally, including in the UK and here in Luxembourg, is an immensely challenging one for businesses. And obviously, how challenging depends on the sector that they're in, and the effect is potentially catastrophic in some sectors. And the governments, I think, across the world are acutely conscious of that, and therefore have taken steps to ensure that they provide as much support as possible. And I'm struck that both Xavier Bettel here and the Chancellor of the Exchequer have talked in terms of doing whatever it takes to support business, and the measures that have been taken across Europe, for example, have many things in common. I think both in the UK and in Luxembourg, about 14% of GDP has been sort of mobilized to support businesses, whether it's in terms of grants or loan guarantees or what it might be. And I think it's an extremely challenging time for politicians, in that they obviously need to focus very much on public health, and an issue of life and death, clearly, but also take into account the economic challenges. And these are not easy times for politicians and policymakers generally. And you can see that in the debates that are happening across countries in Europe about the pace and nature of the process for coming out of the lockdowns that exist in every country across Europe. In the UK, a lot of thought is going into this at the moment, but we really are at a critical moment in the spread of the virus in the UK. Hopefully, it's peaking, but we haven't yet announced what form or timetable our exit, our easing might take. And you'd all be aware of the fact that here in Luxembourg, the first announcement of the steps that were being taken here was made last Wednesday. Construction sites have reopened as of yesterday. More shops are beginning to open. And the challenge, or one of the challenges, obviously, is going to be attempting a degree of coordination between different countries, while preserving the ability to act according to what is required in your own sort of national condition. So I'm very interested to hear, a business perspective in Luxembourg. My sense is that the business community here have fully understood the reasons why quite a sort of severe lockdown was necessary, and have been very supportive of the steps that have been taken, but are naturally sort of anxious to see what the future holds, and to understand what the timetable might be for exiting from these restrictions. And then when it comes to the community, I mean the British community more generally, I mean, I think again the reaction of the community here has been very understanding of the steps that the government has taken. Sense of sort of fortitude, a sense of calmness is what we at the embassy have felt. Yeah, we're lucky that we all live in a country which is really quite good at communicating, and communicating in various languages. So each time an announcement is made, it is available in English very quickly. Details of the steps that have been taken. So the community here knows what the Luxembourg government has done, and is well informed. And as I say, I think they have been very accepting and understanding of the restrictions, and learned to adapt to them, as have the broader population. I think we were lucky here in the sense that there weren't, thousands of British tourists who were in Luxembourg at the key moment, needing to get back to the UK. A lot of my colleagues around the world in embassies and high commissions around the world have been focused on helping British nationals stranded in various locations to get back, either through sort of facilitating commercial flights, or supporting a program of charter flights that the government has been organising. Here in mid-March, very few tourists and people who needed to return back to the UK, I think, were largely able to do so on commercial flights until those stopped. And since then, the routes via road and rail and ferry, while much reduced, have nevertheless remained open. So I know that there have been British nationals here who, for example, have been concerned about elderly relatives, parents back in the UK who have needed to get back at short notice. They've also been concerned about how children studying at university might be able to get back to Luxembourg, because we're close to the UK and have the option of travelling by routes by means other than air, we haven't faced the problems that British communities in further flung parts of the world have done. So there's obviously been quite a lot of sort of debates, within the community here, as there is in broader communities, about, policies around wearing masks and what confinement means, etc. But I don't think that's anything which isn't reflective of the mood and the feeling in the wider community here in Luxembourg. So I think I'll end my comments there. Dan, very interested to hear any views that you have on those three themes, but also to engage with any questions that the audience out there might have.
So thank you very much, John. Thanks to, I see you got 40 people participating right now. So to all of you out there listening to us, please do not hesitate to send in questions. You have the little questions and answer button below. We got already 3 or 4 coming in. But before going there, so thank you very much, John, for your insights on this. Maybe a quick question from myself. How do you, one of the things that has been highlighted pretty early on in this situation was solidarity. Not only solidarity, of course, we all talk about solidarity between businesses, between people in the community, etc. But there's been also a strong focus on international solidarity between countries. I remember at the beginning we knew there was stuff blocked, masks not coming in because they were blocked at the border. Xavier Bittel at a certain point in time said maybe we see limits of the European Union at this point in time. We somehow see a limit of international solidarity, or we need to discover it in a different way. What Macron said on his television speech 2 weeks back was he wanted to take back control on essential activities within his country. That they saw the limit of globalization for when it comes to the protection of a territory. We saw Mr. Trump, who announced that he would skip help to the World Health Organization. Lots of finger pointing over there. Who's in charge of whose error this thing is? Who's the cause of this virus? How do you see that? What is your perspective on this international solidarity between countries or unions, etc.? Do you believe this is a shock for the self-confidence of countries, or the solidarity that sticks us together?
I think that the situation that we are in is unprecedented, and it has put a lot of strain on a lot of relationships. But I think there are lots of positives out there as well. There is a lot of solidarity that exists at the international level as well as at the national local level. I mean, at the national local level, I think one of the things that has been most heartwarming in the UK, in Luxembourg and elsewhere is the solidarity of the wider population for those people who on a daily basis are putting their lives at risk in order to help others, in particular medical professionals, but also very much those in other frontline roles, working in supermarkets, etc. At the international level, we have seen solidarity in the sense of countries coming to each other's needs in the provision, for example, of protective equipment. And when China was facing its worst moments, countries were basically helping out by sending them material. Luxembourg did so, the UK did so, and China is now reciprocating. Many other countries are reciprocating in making large numbers of personal protective equipment available, sometimes at no cost. So I know that the United Arab Emirates, for example, have made gifts to the UK. We're getting a lot of material from Egypt. So there's a lot of solidarity in that sense. There's also been a lot of solidarity in working together amongst countries in helping to get their nationals back. So there was a very well publicized Luxair flight from Cape Verde, which brought back in particular large numbers of Germans, but also Austrians and Dutch and other nationalities. And we have also been facilitating the return of different foreign nationals, including EU nationals, on flights that we have organized in the early days. There was a Luxembourger, for example, who we brought back from Wuhan, and some Luxembourgers on a cruise ship, and their return was facilitated from Brazil through the UK. And there are countless examples of this. And obviously now we're moving into a phase where the virus is moving into other continents. We're obviously particularly concerned about the situation in Africa and countries where, in particular countries where health systems might be weak. So a lot of the focus of the G7 and G20 in the UK is actually leading this kind of work stream within the G7, is on ensuring that as much support as possible is provided to developing countries and to enable them to better face the challenge of COVID-19. And obviously we're also coming together to try and find a vaccine. And the UK again is putting a huge amount of money into the CEPI, which is the main international organisation, which will be leading the efforts to find a vaccine as soon as possible. So yeah, in the news world that we live in, there are always sort of stories that, you know, make your heart sink and bring into question whether the kind of solidarity of old is still there. But on the other hand, there are many positive stories and actions, and we should draw comfort and inspiration from those too.
Yeah, it's going to give us more strength also for what's ahead of us. So at this point in time, I would like to reach out to Jill. So Jill has been gathering all the questions coming in. Can you hear me, Jill?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, Jill. Welcome to the call. So what would be the first question?
The question I can see is that business is still being done in Luxembourg. And of course, it's being done differently. So lots of organizations have managed to solve the IT issues and also the tax implications. People aren't going to be taxed twice across the border. Do you think that this enforced change is going to be permanent?
I think it's, you know, we're all speculating, and people say that after this we can't go back to normal. My personal feeling is that, you know, in many ways we probably will just revert back to how we were acting before. But I do wonder, for example, whether remote working, teleworking is something which might become more prevalent. I know it's complicated, particularly in a sort of Luxembourg context where you've got cross-border situation and agreements between countries that limits the number of days that you can work. But I sense that probably there will be a shift, and that there will be more remote working done by more people on a more regular basis after this.
Okay, thank you. The next question is there a forum for agreeing this unlocking coordination across the EU, and will the UK be part of it?
So I don't know exactly what is happening within the EU on this. I know that Luxembourg is certainly in contact with, particularly with its neighbours on their policies towards easing of the restrictions. The UK is not coordinating, not participating in any sort of EU mechanisms on this, but nonetheless is in very close contact with many other countries, not just in the EU, but further afield, to understand what approach they have taken, are taking, or are contemplating for easing the restrictions for the exit strategy. So that sort of, learning lessons from elsewhere, drawing on thinking elsewhere is something which is happening in many different ways, bilaterally, but also within fora such as the G7, G20, and other groups. So yeah, there's a lot of international cooperation and dialogue on these important issues.
But isn't that really one of the secrets of getting back to normal, that somehow we synchronize the activity between the different countries? It's and that it's communicated to the outside world, because I think if there's a communication between countries right now, we don't hear a lot about it in the general public. Shouldn't there be also some kind of communication effort trying to inform people what's going to happen? If I just take the tourism industry, which is very important in Europe, of course, and with the summer months ahead of us, it's even if Luxembourg says we're going to fly as of the 1st June again, if we don't know if we can fly to Spain or to Italy or to wherever it is, there's no way in doing plans. And that's the same for people in the business itself. So if they don't know how other markets are going to open up, they will not be able to prepare themselves to it. So shouldn't there be a little bit more communication about this?
I mean, the challenge obviously is that every country is at a different phase
the curve, yes.
In the curve, in dealing with the issue, and will have views on what it needs to do at any given time in the interests of the health of its citizens and the economic health of the country. So countries are going to want to do things that are in their own national interest. You're absolutely right that there also needs to be discussion, consultation, coordination to the extent that is possible, and I think that is recognised. But I think what you're still going to see is individual countries taking actions on a timetable which they think is in the best interest of their country.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, there's lots of questions. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them, but there's one here about supply chains and the fact that as a result of the virus, there's clear impact on the global supply chains. And we've realized our dependence on other countries for critical products. So what are your views on the potential for this to support a more nationalistic program? Will countries start to produce more locally in future?
I mean, I think that obviously every country is going to, when we're through this, have to sort of look back on what happened and draw appropriate lessons. And I think one of the clear challenges that certainly countries across Europe have faced is in obtaining sufficient PPE equipment at a time when every country is finding itself short and is looking to buy from elsewhere and in very, very large numbers. Whether it's the UK or Luxembourg or France, whatever, we've all been facing this same challenge. And that might well lead to decisions to have greater national stocks or to have more clarity about how, in such a situation, stocks of this sort of material would be made available as quickly as possible, whether that's through existing manufacturers being able to rapidly expand their production, or other companies being able to move into production of equipment which is most required.
There's a question here from the financial sector, and one of the key questions will be around equivalence of rules. And do you have any indication as to whether this is still on track?
So it's very clear in the political declaration that decisions on equivalence by each side should be taken by June. And that is what needs to happen. And alongside that, we see the need for a chapter on financial services also to be part of the free trade agreement, and that will be a text, a chapter that is negotiated. But the equivalence decisions are decisions which will be taken autonomously by either side. So by the UK in respect of the EU, and by the EU in respect of the UK, and hopefully those will be done by June. Yes.
Okay, and now there's some general questions on the UK government's handling of the virus situation, and linked to the healthcare sector. And given that you've got COVID and a pandemic, can we really hope that this transition period will be sufficient? Has it got enough bandwidth to run the two things together?
Well, we're very clear that we won't need a transition of sufficient time exists for us to conclude a free trade agreement and the other agreements on aviation, for example, civil nuclear cooperation that are also required. So, yeah, we think there is sufficient time.
Okay. And, there's one here about fake news. There's a big increase in fake news surrounding the current crisis on social media. What can governments do to take tangible action to counter this?
Well, this is very, very high on the agenda, I think, of countries around the world. Certainly the EU, certainly the UK, and a lot of pressure, I think, is going on to the main social media platforms to make sure that they take action. But I think what we're facing in COVID-19 is just a reflection of a broader challenge that we face, which is that it is very easy nowadays for fake news to disseminate very quickly, very widely, and in a very unhealthy way. And that will remain a challenge for governments for the foreseeable future, I think, but is one that they are aware of and determined to try and address.
I think
the role of the private sector will be very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the participation effect, the participation effort for everybody in the communication space is going to be really important. It's going to be important that companies speak up, that the ministries speak up, and I think, as you said earlier on, that the ministry has done a pretty good job in Luxembourg informing people. I think it really shows that it's the best strength you have, being open, being transparent, and communicating as much as possible in these times.
There's one about the Heathrow Airport and no checks on flight passengers coming in. Does this surprise you?
No checks on passengers?
Yes, when they arrive into the UK.
I think that's something which is not unique to the UK. It's many countries don't check incoming passengers, those whose airports are still open, and that's based on scientific advice that there's no particular benefit to be gained from that, because lots of people can be asymptomatic and carriers of the virus. That debate's been had. The scientific advisors have given their view, and that's the policy decision the government has taken.
Okay, we're up to the 40 minutes.
Yep. So maybe take the last one.
Yes, the last one. I would say the wider issue. Then we can see that the the COVID virus and the fact that we're all confined is having a big impact on climate, and the planet is recovering. Do you see that anything will change as a result of this?
Yes, well, climate obviously was alongside Brexit. Well, Brexit happened on the 31st of January, but alongside our negotiations with the EU on our future relationship is going to be a big international priority for the UK this year, which is due to be hosting COP26, the latest international negotiations in the context of the framework agreement on climate change. And those have obviously had to be postponed. At the moment, we're consulting with the UN and other key actors on new dates for that. We had been hoping that there would be a very high level of ambition globally for COP26 in terms of governments setting ambitious targets to further reduce emissions by 2030, and also a timetable to reach net zero. Now, I think it's too early to say what the impact of COVID-19 will be on that meeting, on those ambitions. But what I can say is that the UK government, when those dates are fixed, will be working extremely hard to ensure that we are able to deliver the same degree of ambition that we originally want to see. Because while there may have been some sort of short-term positive effects in terms of global emissions of COVID-19, the long-term challenges, obviously, the long-term threats, obviously, continue to exist, and the requirement for urgent action at the global level continues to be there. Realistically, it may be that, you know, some governments, some companies feel they have less money available to implement the steps that were required. But ultimately, the threat is still there, hasn't gone away, needs to be addressed, through ambition on reducing emissions and delivering net zero.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jill, I think that's it.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you very much, Jill, for your support. John, thank you very much for having been with us today. It's I just when I heard you speak about the evolution of the Brexit discussion, it just reminded me. If you remember, we've been talking to each other for months now through these different phases of Brexit, and when we had our last lunch meeting early February, when we all said, okay, finally we know where we are. Finally, this big interrogation is off the table. Brexit happened. We know we now have the time and the force to go through this over the year 2020. And now just one interrogation has been replaced by another interrogations or a set of new interrogations. And it's just the questioning for businesses of course, always very, very a tough time if the businesses don't know what's going to happen. So although we know that Brexit is going to come now, there's new questions that are being added to the set that were already on the table. And I think so insecurity is going to be something that's going to drive lots of business decisions in the weeks and the months to come. And that's always a very difficult situation.
And that is one of the reasons, obviously, for ensuring that the transition period ends on the 31st of December, to ensure that businesses have clarity about what the future trading arrangements will be, whether it's in goods, services, issues around mobility, what all the rules and arrangements will be between the UK and the EU. Okay, well, again, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to meet again in real life
for one of our upcoming conferences where I don't have the agenda yet, I can't tell you, but it's going to be a big pleasure to meet with you and all our friends again in real life. So this concludes our first webinar, our first BCC Live event. I would like to attract your attention to the fact that the next one is going to be next week, and the topic is going to be your brain under quarantine. It sounds really good. It's going to be next Wednesday. Your brain under quarantine. Please check back to our website, bcc.lu, the events section. We'll see all the other conferences that are being planned. I think there are already 4 or 5 planned for the weeks to come. So it's going to be interesting, and we'll stay in touch. And remember that a strong network is more important than ever in these times, because it really helps us to remain connected, share guidance, share experiences, and that's what we really need right now. So have a great day, have a great week, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.